So in the fall of my 8th grade year, I became the first chair drummer on the drum line for my middle school band. Now this was a big deal for a couple of reasons. First, there were no girl drummers ever in the history of the RJO Middle School. And secondly, and less important, in the spring of my 7th grade year, I had gotten arrested in the girls' bathroom for possession with intent to sell marijuana. Now, just hold on to that for a second, we'll get into that later. So, in my re-entry meeting at the middle school, the teachers and the principal and the guidance council, my parents, kind of uniformly agreed that we needed to have a tight plan in order for me to come back to school. The principal wanted some kind of assurance that this wasn't going to happen again. And the teachers weren't sure if they could serve a drug addict and really educate her. And so the counselor really just wanted to know one thing. Why did you do it, Suzanne? I think it's important to understand the underlying meaning of why you would have done this. And so there was just kind of long pause at the table, and I thought, well, I could go with your sort of standard answer, which was adolescent stupidity and peer pressure, but that just seems so bourgeois, and so I didn't want to go with that. And then I thought, well, it's the mid-'70s, and it was that time when television was just starting to come out as rotting kids' brains, and I thought I could blame it on the media. And in truth, I was watching a lot of television. My favorite show was the ABC after-school specials. I don't know if you remember this, but the episode that really had stuck with me was Dawn, Portrait of a Teenage Runaway. And this, do you remember this? All right, for those of you who don't know this, Jan Brady, Eve Plum, who's the middle child of the Brady Bunch, is just being raised in this horrible family, and this tragic things happens, and her mother's an alcoholic, and she runs away, and she ends up taking a bus to California, and instead of just getting a job in a coffee shop, she decides to become a prostitute. And this is the message that they want to leave with us. And so I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking, there's this long pause, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I could probably very plausibly say, hey, look, here's the thing, what's the big deal? At the point where Jan Brady, the middle child of the Brady Bunch, is selling her body for money, what's the big deal if I'm selling a little bit of marijuana in the girls' bathroom? But before I have the opportunity to say that, Mr. Stentz, my music teacher, pipes in. And he says, you know, I don't think why this happened is really as important. I think what we do from here is really the key. And if there's ever a time when someone needed to be in a group of people and appreciated, I think this is the time for her. I loved Mr. Stentz, and it was clear in that moment that he was probably high in that meeting. But that's not why I loved him. I loved him because Mr. Stentz, like every middle school band teacher, this was like a rest stop on just the highway of mediocrity. He was an amazing jazz trumpeter, but he was a really good teacher. And one of the things that made him such an incredible teacher is that he was able to really kind of parcel out who were the kids that were just passing through the band and who were the kids that were really going to be saved by the music program. So there I was. It was fall, and I joined the ranks of the first chairs. And it was me, Patty Napolitano, who was a good friend of mine, who was just very quiet, didn't say much of anything. She was in charge of the brass section. And every time Patty spoke, it was something really incredibly articulate. And then David Stuckety. And David Stuckety was an oboe player, and he was in charge of the woodwind section. And yes, David was everything you would expect a middle school boy oboe player to be. And he was mercilessly tormented by the bullies in the school. But the three of us bonded, and every week we would meet with Mr. Stentz, and we would come together, and we would talk about, here's a list of things that we think should happen in the band to move us forward as a group. And all of the things were things you would think that 13-year-olds that had very little power would come up with, like we should be punishing people that are late and making them stay after and polish the brass instruments. And Mr. Stentz would take these ideas and he would refold them and say, well, here, that's a great idea. Let's add to that. Maybe instead of punishing people, we just make that an incentive. And it was brilliant. And so the first couple of months of band was incredible. And then mid-fall, at the end of rehearsal, he makes an announcement that Joey Hagzan was going to be joining the band. Joey Hagzan, to this day, remains the epic bully. He didn't just torment you and then beat you up. He would torment you, get inside your head, look for the thing that you were most afraid of, and then beat you up in the place where you would be exposed to that thing. So if spiders was your thing, he would beat you up and then you'd lay on the ground with spiders all around you. It was crazy. And so at the end of the rehearsal, we stormed into his office and we said, this can't happen. This is going to be apocalyptic if you let Joey join the band. Now, in truth, Joey didn't join the band. This was a consequence, because in 7th and 8th grade, the only thing worse that you could do to someone other than suspend or expel them was to force them to play the tuba. And Joey had recently lit a roll of toilet paper on fire, and then in an effort to put it out, flushed it down the toilet, which caused a flood. And as he was fleeing the scene and bumped into the assistant principal, and he said, Joey, what just happened? What did you do? He said, oh my gosh, I think there's a bomb in the bathroom. So in one day, he had created what I call the suspension trifecta, which was a fire, a flood, and a bomb threat. Never in the history of the school had this happened before, and quite frankly, it was kind of complicated with my relationship, because I thought this is the first time that people are not talking about the thing that I had done. And so we get to the meeting, and we look at him, and he says, you know, sometimes people behave in ways that we can't always understand. And he looks right at me, and he said, and sometimes you just have to give people a second chance. And I'm thinking, what the hell is he talking about? And Patty Napolitano says, that is crap. And he said, you know, bullies exist, and you're going to have to learn how to coexist with them, and you're going to have to come together and figure this out. And so Joey joins the band, and it's horrible, and it's just as bad as we think it is, but we struggle through it. And we get to the winter concert, and Mr. Stentz decides he's going to do something that no middle school teacher has any business ever doing. And he's going to bring the chorus and the band together for the finale. And we are going to play the 12 Days of Christmas. And so weeks lead up to this, and we're ready to go. And Joey's bullying people, and David's throwing up in the bathroom every morning, and I'm like, this is chaos. And so before the concert, the PTA decides they're going to feed us. And so all of the leads, all of the first chairs say, we're not going to eat because we're leaders and we're just going to let everybody else eat. And so we watch as people just put mounds of cheese doodles in their mouth. And I watch as Joey Hagzan eats more pigs in a blanket than I've ever seen anyone consume. David Stuckety decides he's not going to eat anything, so instead he just sucks on a bunch of candy canes. And so we go out, and the chorus is there, and the band is there, and we do our first opening note, and David Stuckety's fingers are so sticky they get stuck in the B-flat position, so that's pretty much the note that he plays for the whole night. And we get through the first day of Christmas and the second day of Christmas, and honestly, by the third day of Christmas, things are kind of starting to gel. And then all of a sudden, we look over, and Joey Hagzan lets out the tiniest of burps. And a couple of seconds go by, and you can smell this. You can smell, it's a hot dog burp. You can smell the hot dog. And it just sort of hangs over the brass section for a little bit. And David and I and Patty kind of look at each other, and then people start to giggle, which is the worst thing you can do when a bully burps. Because then we get to the fourth day of Christmas, and now he's doing it intentionally. And again, I look at David and Patty, and I think, oh, this is like, we got 8 more frickin' days of this. And so we get to the 5th day of Christmas, and the chorus sings, 5 golden, and Joey Hagzan opens his mouth, and out comes this stream of the most unbelievable vomit mixture I have ever seen, right into Patty Napolitano's French horn bell. And the drumline, who has a perfect view of this, is looking over this, and we freak out. And we stop. And when we stop, the horn section stops. And when the horn section stops, the woodwind stopped. And now the only thing you can hear is the chorus and David Stuccady's one B-flat note. And I look up at Mr. Stentz, and he's doing this with his hand, which is the international sign for please keep going. And just sweat is starting to drip off him, and years of musical education with every bead of sweat is just smashing on the floor. And then I realized this is why I'm first chair. This is why I'm here. And I looked down the drum line, and I was like, we got this. And I start to play. And the drummers start drumming. And then as we start drumming, the horn section comes back in, and then the woodwinds come back in. And by the time we get to the 9th day, everybody is playing, except for Patty and Joey. And I look over, and in the most brilliant act of strength I have ever seen in my life, Patty takes 2 fingers, and she dips the vomit out of her French horn, and she starts to blow. And there is this stream, there are shards of vomit screeching out of her horn all over Joey Hagzan's shirt. And in that moment, it's a Christmas miracle. And we take back the band from the bullies. In the end, Patty Napolitano became a Fortune 500 CEO. David Stuckady is actually an oboist. And Joey Hagzan found Jesus in the place that most bullies find Jesus, at the Dannemore Correctional Facility. And for me, I've been a drummer for 45 years. And I became a mental health counselor. And I learned from Mr. Stentz in that day that it really is true. Bullies are everywhere, and you can't always stop them. But sometimes, if you come together and you link arms, when they start to vomit that at you, you can turn around and just blow that shit right back at them. Thank you.